Okay, we are going to jump into some interesting, but kind of weird, and maybe even a little bit difficult to understand philosophic weeds dealing with the relationships that may exist among language and logic and reality. And in particular, what we're going to do is we're going to look at how adopting different perspectives, how working from different sets of assumptions can change the way that we define those relationships, and then by implication, how that has an impact on how we do logic and how we make arguments, what kinds of arguments we can make. One of the perspectives that we're going to look at is offered to us by the 19th century mathematician, logician, philosopher George Boole. And when we look at these things through George Boole's eyes, we'll be adopting the Boolean standpoint. Okay, so when we look at the world from George Boole's shoes, we're working from the Boolean standpoint. The other perspective that we're going to look at comes to us, or is associated with, old Uncle Aristotle, who was thinking about logic thousands of years before Boole even walked the face of the earth. And so when we look at these things through Aristotle's eyes, when we stand in Aristotle's sandals and we look at the world from his perspective, we will be working from the Aristotelian standpoint. Okay, so let's define carefully what these two different perspectives are and how their assumptions are different. So Boole's going to come out of the gate and he's going to say, look, when I make to you I statements or O statements, when I make a statement that starts with the word some, I say some are this or some are not that, I'm implying to you that my subject term refers to something that actually exists in reality. And Aristotle's going to be like, I'm cool with that. That makes sense. Okay. So Boole's going to say, so when I say some dogs are canines, I'm saying there exists at least one dog that's included in this category called canines. And Aristotle's like, yeah, what else could you possibly mean? And Boole says, well, I'll show you what I could possibly mean. What else I could possibly mean. When I say things like all dogs are canines or no dogs are canines, I'm not actually saying there exists any dogs at all. And Aristotle's like, excuse me, this doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. When you say all dogs are canines, you're not actually implying there's any dogs at all. You're telling me that all of them are included in this category called canines, but you're also not saying that they exist necessarily? That doesn't make any sense. And Boole's going to say, well, yeah, that's because my starting assumption is that my universal statements, my statements that begin with the word all or no, they don't have this property called existential import. In other words, these kinds of statements don't import existence into the subject term. I'm not implying that the subject of my all statement or my no statement refers to anything that actually exists in reality. Okay? And Aristotle's going to respond to this by saying, this is so dumb because the whole point, Aristotle's going to say, particularly given his political and ethical philosophy, the whole point of language and logic is to be able to discover and communicate what's true about this reality that we inhabit so that we can figure out how to make better decisions and figure out a way to live the good life. Okay? And Boole's going to respond to this and say, well, yeah, dude, you're still wearing sandals and you have no idea about the power of this abstract thinking that I'm advocating for to do things like 20th century computing. Okay, so Boole's advocating for this very high level abstract kind of logic. And Aristotle's, he's more on the ground, right? Aristotle's like, look, life is short. We got to talk about things that matter. The things that matter are the things that are real, the things that are in our life, the things we have to figure out how to navigate. So to waste any time talking about things that don't exist is quite frankly just a waste of time. It's dumb. Okay? So Aristotle's going to say, so just know this, George. When I say all dogs are canines or no dogs are canines, I'm actually implying that dogs exist. I'm telling you something about something that is a feature of reality. My set of assumptions is that my all and my no statements, my universal statements, they actually have existential import. I'm implying that the thing I'm making the claim about actually exists. I'm telling you that all of these things are either included or excluded from this category, and that these things actually exist to be included and excluded from those in those categories. All right? And Boole's just going to be like, whatever, you don't get it. Okay? What Boole's going to say is, for me, whenever you have an argument that has this form, this is something worth writing down, make note of this. When we're operating from the Boolean standpoint, when we're looking at an argument through Boole's perspective, an argument that has a universal premise, an all or a no statement that's being offered to us as true, and a particular conclusion, one that begins with the word some, and is being offered to us as true, that argument is always invalid from the Boolean perspective because it commits the existential fallacy. It makes the mistake of thinking that because the universal premise asserts something about all of something, that we can draw a conclusion that that thing actually exists to be able to assert a conclusion about some number of those things. Aristotle's going to say, I'm cool with this argument form, as long as your universal premise has a subject term that refers to something that actually exists. Okay? So what Aristotle means is, if you make an argument like this one, all dogs are canines, therefore some dogs are canines, I'm cool with this because dogs actually exist as a feature of reality. Okay? And Boole's going to say, yeah, I don't care about that. I don't care about whether dogs exist or not. It's the form of this argument that bothers me, Boole says. And I'm going to reject this form always, no matter, it doesn't matter whether or not dogs exist or whatever your subject term exists. I'm always going to reject this argument form as having an existential fallacy. And Aristotle comes back and says, do whatever you want, but I'm cool with this kind of argument. And I think it's a useful kind of argument. And I don't think an argument like this one has an existential fallacy unless the subject term of the premise doesn't exist. So Aristotle would say, if you make this argument, all leprechauns are green creatures, therefore some leprechauns are green creatures, I'm not cool with that, Aristotle says. But I'm not cool with it, not because of the form necessarily, but because of the way that the form is interacting with the subject term of your premise. Leprechauns don't exist in reality. So Aristotle says, you can't therefore make an argument that because all of them are green creatures, there must be one that exists that justifies your conclusion. So Aristotle's going to say this argument, it also commits the existential fallacy from my perspective because it's got the form of a universal premise and a particular conclusion, but its subject term doesn't exist. Okay, so here's the important takeaway. From the Boolean standpoint, any argument with this form always is invalid. It commits the existential fallacy. Okay, but that argument form might express a valid argument from the Aristotelian standpoint. Okay, as long as the subject term exists and it doesn't have any other fallacies like illicit conversion or illicit contraposition, this kind of argument could be valid from an Aristotelian standpoint, even though it's invalid from a Boolean standpoint. Now, we describe these different kinds of arguments this way. Again, worth writing down. Any argument that's valid from the Boolean standpoint is also valid from the Aristotelian standpoint. We say that arguments that are valid from the Boolean standpoint are unconditionally valid. When we say that, what we're saying is it's valid from both perspectives, both standpoints. But an argument that's valid from the Aristotelian standpoint only is called a conditionally valid argument, okay? And what makes it conditionally valid is that there is a condition that has to be met for it to be valid from the Aristotelian standpoint. And the condition is that the subject term of the premise has to refer to something that actually exists, okay? So now look at the argument that kind of brought us here. All students in this class are people with interesting life stories. Therefore, some students in this class are people with interesting life stories. Okay, we have an argument that has the form that really bothers Boole. Okay, so from the Boolean standpoint, we have a universal premise and a particular conclusion, and that kind of argument is always invalid from the Boolean standpoint, even though, in this case, coincidentally, the premise and the conclusion statement are both true. Okay, but this kind of form could be valid from the Aristotelian standpoint. In other words, it's conditionally valid, even though it has a universal premise and a particular conclusion. And the condition that has to be met is that the subject term has to refer to something that exists in reality. Do you exist? If so, Aristotle's condition for validity has been met, and we can say that this argument is conditionally valid. It's valid from the Aristotelian standpoint only, and we've met the condition for validity from the Aristotelian standpoint.